Watching Kyle's unboxing videos again?
Yeah, he always finds the coolest... No way! A robot dog? Gotta ask where he got it.
Or use your Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Just draw a circle around the dog on your screen, and it shows you where to buy it right in the app.
Whoa, I just learned a new trick. And that for once, I beat Kyle to the next big thing.
Circle it, find it with the new Galaxy S24 Ultra and circle the search with Google. Get yours now at Samsung.com. Internet connection required. Results may vary based on visuals.
Hello, Duke fans, and welcome to episode 378 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. It is Thursday morning, January 13th, 2022, and Duke is back in the win column with a 76-64 win over Wake Forest. It's their first ACC road win of the season, first road win of the season as a whole, and we will recap all the good and the bad, and we even have some audio from the post-game press conference. We will also preview the next game, which is a weekend matchup with NC State. But first, I'm Donald Wine, your host for this episode. I have my two friends with me as always, Jason Evans and Sam Klein. First of all, Jason, good morning to you, sir.
Hey, good morning, Donald. Wow, there was for a sort of, I guess rudimentary ACC road game, there was just a lot of interesting stuff that happened last night.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was a very interesting game. We're obviously going to talk about all of it. But first, Sam, good morning to you as well.
Yeah, normally, at least the last few years, road game at Wake Forest is like, all right, road game at Wake Forest. I think that's like the most normal ACC game there is. But this was anything but.
Yeah, I mean, a couple years ago, we had that game that went to overtime where both teams scored 100 points inexplicably during the Zion, RJ, Cam years. But yeah, this one seemed to top that one as well.
That game, the double overtime game, that's the Justin Robinson game.
It is a Justin Robinson game. I was just saying it was a couple years ago.
Yeah.
It seems like yesterday that we were talking about that game on this show. And now we get to talk about yet another kind of wild sequenced game that had many, many parts into it. But let's get right into it. Let's recap this game against Wake Forest. They win again, 76-64 in a game that started out, and we have to start out with the news that just before tip-off, we learned that Coach K did not make the trip to Winston-Salem. It was announced he had a non-COVID related virus. I will repeat that, a non-COVID related virus. So, of course, we hope that Coach K is feeling better this morning. He continues to rest up and get better. We obviously want to see him back on the bench really soon. But because of this illness, we did get a sneak peek at Jon Scheyer, the head coach, as he took the reins last night in K's absence. So before we get into the good, as we normally do, we will certainly discuss that and hear more from Jon Scheyer. But gentlemen, I want to start with the headline as we always do. Sam, we'll start with yours.
You teed me up perfectly. I just had Griffin and Scheyer move to starring roles for Duke.
Very simple. I like that. Jason, what do you got?
That was it.
Yeah, and it's almost like Sam and I were looking at each other's papers and cheating off each other because I have a very similar headline. My headline is new lineup, new coach, no problems.
Interesting. I like it. So mine is a little bit interesting. Mine is Duke's case of the runs has perfect timing to spark huge win over Wake Forest.
I don't know if I like that.
I didn't think you would.
I'm not thrilled about that. But
you know what?
It's appropriate. I mean, at least
it's appropriate.
It's true. I don't like it, but it's true.
Talking about the runs is always appropriate.
Yes. Well, it helps when it's 22-1. So, you were talking about something else. We'll save that for another show. But
I was like, I don't know. Is that an illness thing?
No, we're good. We're just gonna go straight to the good, since mine was bad. We'll go straight to the good. And I want to preface this that we want to do this
Donald,
section.
really quick. People come to us for the inside poop. I don't think they want to talk about that kind of inside poop.
Well, is this the old ACC recruiting page?
Your mind is in the gutters, both
sheet.
of you. I was talking about basketball. I don't know what you guys were talking about, but I digress.
I was talking about actually. I was on topic because I was talking about those ugly T-shirts that the Wake Forest students wear to the games.
Oh yeah, those were terrible.
Yeah,
we won't
poop
discuss
shirts.
those.
Yeah,
they're not worthy of being discussed on this show. But okay, I want to get to the good. We're going to do this section a bit differently than we normally do, because as I mentioned, we got some audio from Jon Scheyer, Wendell Moore, and others who were made available to media last night after the game. Obviously, they always have a post-game press conference, but this time, because it was virtual, Jason was able to join and get us some audio, and we're going to kind of weave it into this portion of the discussion because a lot of it was dealing with stuff that happened that was really good. So I want to start there. Jason, talk to us about what you learned from the press conference as we kind of dive into this good section from last night.
Yeah, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to let you hear a piece of sound from me talking to Wendell Moore, and the topic here is the adjustments that Duke made at halftime, which I think is one of the biggest stories from this game. And after we hear from Wendell, we can talk a little bit more about what Duke did in the first half and what they did in the second half. Actually, we should save the first half stuff for when we talk about the bad. I guess we'll primarily talk about the adjustments that Duke made in the second half. But before we get to that, Wendell Moore was one of the players who came on and spoke to the media. And I asked him specifically about what Jon Scheyer said to the team to get Duke to turn around, because frankly, the team that Duke was for most of the first half and the team that Duke was for the second half, completely different animals. And so here is Wendell Moore talking to me about the halftime adjustments.
Yeah, Wendell, I wanted to ask about halftime, because in the first half, you guys only had 3 assists in the whole first half. I mean, frankly, it seemed like you were struggling to get into much offensive flow. Did Jon Scheyer say anything special to you guys at the halftime? What was the message there that got us to have such a turnaround then for the second half?
Yeah, and his message was just really just kind of calm down and get back to playing Duke basketball how we were playing. I'd probably say in the first 4 to 5 minutes we had good offense. Everybody was moving the ball, getting touchy, we were feeding inside. Paulo was just going to work. Kind of towards the end of that, we kind of got away from it. Kind of got to a lot of one-on-one stuff. So his message for us was really just to settle down, get back to playing how we were playing, just take really just every advantage defense gives us, and we don't got to force anything.
So as Wendell said, in the first half, this Duke team was just going one-on-one. And like I said, I'll wait until we get to the bad to talk about that extensively. But in the second half, Duke was sharing the ball just so much better than they were in the first half. They had 10 second half assists, which is a pretty good number. It was Paolo Banchero and AJ Griffin who were borderline unstoppable. When those two guys are hitting step back threes as they did in the second half, forget about it, because you have to play them for the drive, because they're so great at putting the ball on the floor and driving. And to me, the fact that Duke figured out a way to turn around a bad first half into a really great second half was, it was just a sign of a team that's maturing and getting a lot better. I thought we were incredibly lucky to be up 6 points at the half. We had that little 8-0 run in the final seconds of the first half when, really that first half, we could have easily been down. And then, like I said, in the second half, we started sharing the ball better, and Wake just fell asleep on D a few times. I thought Wake Forest I was expecting them to be better on defense than they were. And for them to the inbounds passes, there were back-to-back inbounds passes where Wake just fell asleep and gave Duke, lobs for slam dunks. And that gives you those kind of plays give you so much energy as a team, and they sap the energy from the opposition so much it demoralizes your opponent. And the other thing I wanted to note about it was, and we can talk more specifically about Paolo Banchero, but in the second half, Paulo often had a smaller man on him, and he was taking that smaller man into the post, and Wake had no answer. And I'm really surprised that Steve Forbes and the Wake Forest team wasn't able to come up with some way to get the ball out of Paulo's hands, because he was burning them so badly. To me, one of the most telling statistics in this game is that Paolo Banchero had 1 assist. And by that, I mean, they didn't force him to give up the ball. They didn't force Paulo to find his Duke teammates. They just allowed him to keep on taking the ball into the post and scoring. And that's not a good way to play against Duke, because Paulo is too good one-on-one in the post. So, I just thought the story of the game was the way Duke adjusted at halftime and the way Paulo was able to take over. And then after he took over a little bit, AJ took over and forget about it. All right, I'm covering too much stuff. I want to let you guys.
I actually think, Jason, that NC State did what they, or excuse me, NC State. I'm looking ahead to this weekend. I think that Wake Forest did what they could with Paulo Banchero because he wasn't efficient last night. There were a lot of missed shots, a lot of altered shots. I actually think that they were probably, realizing that they did not have the size to overcome him. So it was kind of.
But they're one of the bigger. They're one of the bigger teams in the ACC. Though.
I think big are different.
Yeah, I think effectively they don't have what it takes to contain him, and so there's an element of, all right, there's this guy who's a great scorer from everywhere on the court. Fine, he's going to take a lot of shots. I think they were probably trying to contain other guys, and it just didn't work because AJ Griffin was so efficient. Wendell Moore had we can get to this in the bad, but like Wendell Moore didn't have as much of the offensive output. I actually think part of that is the design of having Griffin in the game more, taking more shots. The shots have to come from somewhere. And coming back to Paulo, Paulo does not have an efficient night, but he still manages to score a lot, but he facilitates and he creates opportunities for other guys to be open. He doesn't have the assists, but he draws the attention away. And so is AJ Griffin able to have the great night that he does without Paulo being on the floor? I'm not sure that that's necessarily possible. So the good here is that Duke brings a lot of weapons, and that if one guy is not quite as efficient, somebody else is. Paulo actually, if you're looking at the shot charts, Paulo probably has a better first half than he does second half, but he draws so much of the attention that that things just work. The rest of the Duke offense works a little bit better in the second half. I've talked in previous games about how I'm still kind of flummoxed that the Duke offense rates so highly in KenPom, given how much isolation there is in the offensive sets. Much better in the second half on that front last night, and so I'm much happier seeing the Duke offense work the way it did for that first 10 minutes of the second half than I probably have in the last few weeks.
I will say, though, as much as we talk about the halftime adjustments, and those were great to come out and really go on that, what appeared to be, it was like a 16-1 run or something to start the second half. I want to go back to the end of the first half, because I really think the adjustments started there with 54 seconds left. I know that carries into this run, this 22-1 run that they had, but with 54 seconds left, I just want to go through the sequence of what happened. All right. So 54 seconds left. Wake Forest is at the free throw line. They had just made a shot. They missed the free throw. Williams gets the rebound. We get a 2-pointer from Wendell Moore. Then they run the offense, Wake Forest does. And then Trevor Keels steals the ball, gets it out to Wendell Moore, who then gets it back to Keels for a 3-pointer. At that point, if you notice, Jon Scheyer is trying to call a timeout, but he gets beaten to the punch by Brooks. So Wake Forest calls a timeout. Immediately out of that timeout, they run a play. AJ Griffin snuffs it out immediately, draws the offensive foul, and then on the end of the play, we call a timeout, set up a play, and we go down and we get a 3-pointer from AJ Griffin to close out the half. I think some of those halftime adjustments started with 54 seconds left in the game, because you could clearly see Jon Scheyer and Nolan Smith, who I know we'll talk about in a minute as well, we're clearly going to these guys saying, hey, watch for this play. This guy's getting the ball. Let's start this flow right now. And then when this happens, Trevor, you go over here. Because it was very clear, like even take the first 19 minutes of the first half out of the equation, that last minute was quite different. And it fueled what went on in the locker room. And they came out with a purpose in the second half. And I think they realized from that run, that little mini run to end the first half, that they could impose their will whenever they wanted to. And now was the time. They came out guns blazing, and the rest is history.
This is one of these games where it's really tough for me to separate the good from the bad, because there's so much of the good that sort of weaves in what happened, the bad that happened in this game. And so I'm going to get into a little bit of something that happened in the first half that then changes in the second half that I think we just have to talk about right now, which is the ball movement and the shot selection, and specifically the assists. Because Donald, what you just noted about what Duke did in the final minute. So I went back and I looked at the box score. During the first half, I was like, wow, we just, it doesn't feel like we're moving the ball very much at all. We're doing nothing but going one-on-one. And I checked the box score at the 18-minute mark, just 2 minutes into the game. I talked about the fact that Paulo had one assist. He got his one assist. He passed to AJ Griffin and they got a 3-pointer. It was one of the few times that Paulo sort of got doubled in the post. And so he passed it out to AJ and he hit a 3-pointer. That's the 18-minute mark. Duke doesn't get another assist in the entire first half until we get to that final minute when AJ Griffin fed Mark Williams for a dunk. And then Wendell Moore found Trevor Keels, like you were talking about, Donald, for a wide open 3-pointer. So Duke goes 17 minutes of the first half without getting an assist. That's stunning to me. This is a team. First of all, you'd think you would just happen into an assist at some point. One of them would just happen, somehow on its own. But
we do assist better than most teams in the country, and couple that with the fact that we rarely turn the ball over. We've had obviously a couple games that's happened. Our assist to turnover ratio is one of the top 5 in the country. So it's one of those things that you've come to expect Duke to be moving the ball around. And I thought in the first half, honestly, watching the game in real time, I didn't think the offense was as stagnant as it was until I looked at the box score. I remember telling my best friend, oh, it doesn't seem like we've only had 3 assists, but there was a point where you go, yeah, the offense is kind of stagnated. That was why they just weren't able to find guys open for some reason. And it's not like they were turning the ball over. They just weren't getting open looks at the basket.
Yeah. And it bears out in the field goal percentage. It wasn't that Duke was shooting that poorly. It's that they were taking bad shots because they were just relying on going one-on-one. In the first half, Duke's field goal percentage was 42%. That's bad. That is problematic. 42%. You're not going to win a lot of games that way. In the second half, Duke shot 60.7%. And again, it wasn't just that they were shooting better. It's that they were getting better shots. It's just a huge difference when you get a better shot.
Another thing on the good that I wanted to highlight is that if you look at the minutes played in this game, I feel like they more accurately reflect the the sort of overall quality of this team. And if we want to transition to talking about Scheyer a little bit, looking at the way the lineup was constructed and the way that he used substitutions yesterday, I thought felt more like what the end state for Duke is going to look like this year than it had in previous games. Obviously, Wendell Moore and Paulo Banchero are going to play nearly every minute for Duke, even in a game where, Duke kind of had Wake Forest at a distance for most of the second half after they went on that run. But Moore and Banchero play nearly every minute. AJ Griffin has emerged in a way that makes it very hard to take him off the court on offense and on defense. Trevor Keels may have fallen off a little bit in this game, but we think that there may be some injury concern there, and hopefully he's rehabbing that a little bit while being able to stay on the court.
I will say he had a plus 27 last night, which is incredible. I think that
for a guy who's
one of the biggest outputs of the season. So that means when he was on the court, a lot of things were happening when he was on the court. And yeah, he had that injury but in the second half, but I feel like when he was in the game, he just seemed to change a lot of the dynamic of what was going on. And he was looking for guys. He may not have gotten the assists in every play, but he was starting the ball movement around, especially in that second half during the run.
So the injury to me, it looked like, we should just address this really quickly. It was like a shoulder or arm thing, and it looked like it might have been muscular. Like he wasn't holding it in a way that said his shoulder was dislocated or something like that. I think it may have just been like a little bit of a pulled muscle in there. I don't think it's going to be too bad. We haven't heard official word yet, and hopefully it's nothing serious. But I was just relieved that it wasn't something that it looked bad with a leg or something like that could be troublesome for a while.
And then looking down the rest of the lineup, the guys who sort of taking more of a back seat because of AJ Griffin's getting these additional minutes. Mark Williams is down to in the 20 to 25 minute a game range. He played 22 last night. And then of course, Jeremy Roach going to the bench. I actually think that this is a good thing for Duke, not just because I think that the best lineup is the one that started last night, but because I think it actually is a motivator for Roach and will force him to kind of recalibrate his role on the team. Not that I think that he's not important, but it sort of tells him that, like, look, you're not Jeremy Roach is not the point guard the way that we all sort of assumed he was going into the season. Wendell Moore is the point guard on this team, and I think he played more point guard last night than we had sort of been thinking about in recent weeks. He doesn't take as many of the shots last night. He's not the focus on offense the way that Griffin and Banchero are, and I think that's the key to success for this Duke team. If Jeremy Roach is able to be more of a super sub than being he must be on the court at all times kind of guy.
In our recap last week of Duke's loss to Miami, I mentioned that I wanted Duke to find a way to get AJ Griffin, Paolo Banchero, and Mark Williams on the floor together. That was a lineup I really wanted to see if Duke could find a way to exploit, because for the most part, we were seeing AJ Griffin get time at power forward, and moving Paolo over to center. I know Duke doesn't play with positions, but you guys understand what I'm saying. Duke figured out a way to get the three of those guys on the floor together. They all started. They put AJ in the starting lineup, and lo and behold, suddenly all three of those guys were on the floor together. And I thought they worked together really, really well. AJ scores 22 points on 11 shots. He was fabulous in this game. And guys, I wanted to get to, if we can, a little more of my sound that I got from the post game interviews, and I wanted to specifically let folks hear from head coach in waiting and head coach for one game, Jon Scheyer. Here's Steve Wiseman, one of the beat reporters, one of the best reporters for covering Duke basketball. He asked Coach Scheyer about the lineup change, about moving AJ into the starting lineup. Here's what Scheyer had to say about that.
Jon, what was the main idea behind the lineup change, and what did that give you tonight?
Well, first of all, it gave us great size. It's that group that we put out there to begin the game. It's a big team. Trevor Keels and Wendell Moore is your two smallest players, and they're big guards. They can switch really, really well, switch, 1 through 4 at times, 1 through 5. And AJ Griffin has just been coming on. He's just been playing really well. Still need Jeremy to come through big for us, and he did that in the second half. But it's really AJ's emergence, the consistency that Mark Williams has had, and then really to spotlight and highlight Paolo Banchero. And Paolo played a terrific game. Thought at the end there he had a chance to have 30 plus, but he just really carried us, especially in the beginning of the game, the way he set the tone. So I think that lineup helped. And again, we'll be ready to make changes as the season goes on.
Look, obviously, Jon Scheyer knows a lot more about basketball than the rest of us, but he said a lot of stuff there that I think is pretty obvious. Having AJ in there makes Duke more switchable. It creates a big lineup, but guys who can guard guys who are smaller than them. And like he said, it means that we have all these guys who can switch, 1 through 4, maybe even 1 through 5. The other thing he said was that it allows them to spotlight Paolo Banchero a little bit more and allowed Paolo to carry the team a little bit extra. I think, AJ he's a very good ball handler, but he's not going to sort of have the ball in his hands quite as much maybe as Jeremy Roach, because he's not, sort of a traditional point guard type. And maybe as a result, that puts the ball in Paolo Banchero's hands a little tiny bit extra. I also think that AJ's shooting creates more spacing. Not that Jeremy Roach isn't a good shooter. Roach is he's much better than he was last year. He's a good shooter, but he's not the shooter that AJ Griffin is. And just having an extra guy like that on the floor creates extra space for Paolo to operate.
That step back 3 from AJ Griffin that he has in his arsenal is lethal. And we were able to see it quite a bit last night in just the way that, again, you said he's not going to have the ball in his hands. He's not going to be the one, trying to dribble, drive, and create and distribute. But he has that option when he has the ball to take a couple of dribbles and make it where a guy is 6 inches in his face, and then the next second he's 6 feet away from his face, and he has all that room to shoot. So I thought that was a good move by Jon, by Coach K and the coaching staff. I do want to point out about Jon that we got a glimpse a little bit of his coaching style, right? Like, he's not going to be calling timeouts, yelling at people's faces. Like, if people are thinking, he's just an extension of Coach A, he is not. He is Jon Scheyer. And what I saw a lot, and Jason, I want to go back to you because I think he addressed this directly, is he had his assistants working a little bit more. He had his assistants kind of more active in the game, telling him what they're seeing and kind of making a more of a collaborative effort, which I thought was very interesting. So why don't you talk about Jon, the coach, because I think that was one of the main dynamics of the game is looking at the future of Duke basketball.
Yeah. So Luke DeCock is one of the reporters who was on the post-game news conference, and he asked Jon Scheyer specifically about his approach to coaching this game. And I love the answer because, like you said, Donald, folks, you're going to hear Scheyer talk about his assistants and what a key role they played in the Duke's success this game. Have a listen.
Hey, Jon, obviously not the first time you've stepped in as coach, but the first time since the future changed a little bit. And I'm just curious if you took any kind of different approach to tonight than you might have the BC game a year ago, just because you have a different outlook on what this might be like going forward.
Honestly, no. I mean, it wasn't a different outlook. It was, you better win, or that call to Coach K afterwards isn't going to be fun. You don't want to let him down. But no, I think there's just more of a comfort that you have, the first time doing it. First of all, it's never comfortable when you're coaching in Cameron and nobody's there. So that's not comfortable, like, to begin with, which is what it was last year coaching against BC. But, comfortable, confident, very confident in our staff being able to step up. I had the scout. And so, where there are multiple voices that our players could hear, Nolan Smith stepped up and crammed basically for, several hours there just to, know Wake more and to know their specials. And you could see him yelling out their plays. So just the chemistry with our staff, the confidence in each other, I think that played even a bigger part in what we did tonight.
I mean, I adore what he had to say there about Nolan Smith, and that Nolan, stepped up, crammed on Wake, really put in a lot of effort, and then was sort of the lead voice telling the team what Wake was trying to do on each one of their possessions. And I thought Duke's defense was excellent. Wake Forest is a very, very good offensive team. That's sort of where they've hung their hat this season. Duke ends up holding them to 64 points, which is a really low output for Wake Forest. And Wendell Moore, by the way, was a key part of that. Alondas Williams, who's a fabulous player. I mean, clearly a strong contender for first team All ACC. And for us to force Alondas Williams into, he struggled finding the shots he wanted. He committed 7 turnovers. That's a huge number. That was where I thought Wendell was really great, was he put Alondas in positions where Alondas wasn't comfortable. And as a result, he committed 7 turnovers. Alondas Williams had 4 of his shots blocked. I thought Duke, even though Alondas Williams got 25 points, which is a big number, I thought Duke did a really outstanding job identifying what Wake wanted to do on offense and then taking that away from them.
I think there's definitely times for Jon Scheyer where you could see what his coaching style was like with the players. I know a couple of guys on this audio asked about how the players reacted to him differently than last year. And I think he joked at one point, he was like, well, there was fans in the stands last night. There wasn't when he did the interim coaching job last year in an empty Cameron. But there was a point where Mark Williams, he had just picked up his 3rd foul, and you could see he was dejected because in my mind, it really wasn't a foul. He immediately pulled him over and he kind of just was talking to him as we went to commercial break. You could kind of see him just kind of, hey, like, you're doing fine. You're doing exactly what you need to do. And just kind of giving him a few, pointers, just talking to him man to man. Of course, Mark Williams was upset, but he was able to calm Mark down because I think this was right. I think as we enter the second half. And so he knew, like, yo, you're going to be a big part of the second half. And sure enough, when we came out of the break, Mark Williams was all over the place and was making it happen. And I know he had the foul trouble, but when he was in the game, he was active on defense, especially. And even if he wasn't getting blocks, he was getting a couple of key rebounds and leading fast breaks with those rebounds. He did. I mean, I like that we got to see, again, a glimpse of the future of what we can expect from Jon Scheyer, the head coach.
Yeah, I appreciated how much he shared with us about the kind of behind the scenes, what it takes to prepare for the game and how much they had to change their roles. Because by the way, this is how it's going to look next year. You know, we don't know for sure that the rest of the coaching staff. I think we can be pretty sure that Nolan Smith is still around. I don't know if Chris Carrawell and or Emil Jefferson are going to be exactly in the roles that they're in this year. You could definitely imagine Chris Carrawell getting a head coaching job if he really wanted it. Emil Jefferson presumably gets to bump up to being a full assistant, but neither of those is guaranteed. So, you know, it's possible that Duke brings in another assistant, but I do think this is going to be Scheyer with Nolan Smith as the, you know, associate head coach or very near assistant, you know, top assistant head coach here. And
Sam,
we got that preview.
I'm going to disagree on that, Sam. I think, yeah, Carrawell might get a head coaching job, but if he doesn't, and I think there's a decent chance he doesn't. Look, it's hard to predict when guys are going to get coaching jobs. I think Carrawell becomes the associate head coach. Nolan Smith is clearly taking a big role in recruiting, and he is someone whose coaching star is on the rise. But I think just the years that Carrawell has on him,
that makes sense.
Yeah, I think Carrawell is going to be the associate head coach next year. We're into rampant speculation. We don't know.
Yeah. I will say, I don't know whose call it was to draw up some of these out of bounds plays, but they were working last night. So shout out to the entire coaching staff for those out of bounds plays.
I'm going to guess it was Jon Scheyer, only because when Jon Scheyer was a player, he was the one that was executing all of the best out of bounds plays.
From the out of bounds.
He was the master of the you know, hit the defender in the back with the ball and just get the easy layup or you know, inbound very quickly and then find an open three and get the ball back to you. So I feel like Jon Scheyer was the master of that as a player.
The amount of dunks that we saw from out of bounds plays last night is more than we've seen from a Duke team in a long time. And they were all at key points where it was like, oh, Wake Forest thinks I might be catching back. Nope. Game over.
While we're on the topic of the lineup and the way that Jon Scheyer constructed the lineup, can I go to an email that we got? I can't remember now. I'm pulling it up if it was last night or this morning. I think it was late last night from listener Jonathan, who emails us from time to time, who said that opening stretch of the second half with that lineup, let's do that. That was his comment about it. And I agree. I wanted to appreciate that email because I think he was feeling he expressed very succinctly what Duke fans were feeling last night about the way that the opening to that second half went.
Okay, Jason, wrap this up with the good. We have to go back to the man that is named, his government name, Adrian Darnell Griffin Jr. We know him as AJ, and we know him as a boss.
Yeah, there's one other thing I wanted to point out about AJ Griffin. And this is a guy who, you know, we look at he's got a great shot. He's a fabulous athlete. But I wanted to talk about his basketball IQ, because the more I watch AJ Griffin, the more I think that this guy, you can tell he's a coach's son, that he grew up around basketball. There was a moment in the second half, folks, if you still have the tape of this game, go to about the 16-minute mark. And there's a series where Wake Forest has the ball. And it's one of these series where the rebound, it's just really tough to get a rebound. Like both teams are battling. I think Wake takes a shot, the ball gets knocked out of bounds, as both teams are fighting. It's just one of these possessions where it felt like everybody was trying to rebound and no one could grab it. And in the midst of this possession where there were, big man after big man after big man, two big teams, Duke and Wake Forest, trying to get the ball, everyone trying to grab it, no one can grab it. AJ goes up, he can't grab it, but you see him really perfectly identify exactly where Trevor Keels is on the wing, and he directs the ball over to Trevor Keels. Rather than grabbing it, he taps it to Trevor, and Trevor immediately turns up court. Duke is suddenly racing the other direction really fast, and we end up getting a vicious dunk by Paulo Banchero out of it. The whole thing takes 3 seconds. It was like I said, it was at the 16-minute mark. Duke was starting to pull away, but Duke hadn't pulled away yet. It was one of these kind of plays where like I talked about, it's demoralizing to the opposing team. They're battling so hard for the rebound, and suddenly we are running the other direction. But the play starts. You talk about the hockey assist. You don't get an assist in the record book. I'm not even sure that AJ got a rebound in the record book for this, but you saw him clearly understand what he was doing. And it's just a super high IQ basketball play. And you see that from him again and again. And, like I said a second ago, for someone with his athletic and basketball gifts to also have a high basketball IQ, wow. And we're not going to play the sound from it, but Wendell Moore at one point in the postgame, they asked Wendell about AJ moving into the starting lineup. And Wendell almost got choked up for a second because
I was going to say, I could hear it on the audio.
Yeah. You heard him talking about how hard AJ works. And just recognizing that this is a guy who's going to be a super special talent and who has fought through so much adversity from all those injuries, and to now be in the starting lineup. And Wendell was like, y'all don't understand. We've been seeing it in practice. We know what this guy can do. Duke was one of the best teams in the land when AJ Griffin was barely contributing. And I just think, the player we saw last night, if that's the AJ Griffin that Duke is going to get consistently moving forward, man, you got to feel like this team's going to be playing in New Orleans at the end of the year.
There are two kinds of players who are the offspring of athletes themselves. And some of them are entitled and feel like, well, my dad or my mom was so-and-so, like I must be this great. And then there's AJ Griffin and Paulo Banchero, who fit into the second category of guys who recognize how hard their athletic parents had to work to get to where they got to, and appreciating that level of work. And those, clearly those parents had something to do with the work ethic here, and explaining to them that there is no substitute for working hard and pushing yourself, because both of them just seem to have such good attitudes about putting in the effort. And yeah, they're going to make mistakes, but then there are going to be games last night from AJ Griffin, where he looks every bit the big time NBA prospect that we were told he was coming into this season.
Look, I mean, when I was like 2 years old, when I was like for my birthday, whatever, I got an Atari, or I got a Commodore 64, or I got some board games, or I got some books. Adrian got his son's gyms because, I mean, look, AJ Griffin's arms, that was not cultivated last year. That is a lifelong process. You could tell the work that he has put into just his body to get it to where he is able to. Again, remember at the beginning of the season, we were talking about when will he come back from his knee injury, and now we're talking about when can we ever take him off the court because he's that good so far. So it's the AJ that we were expecting in the preseason we were going to get, and I'm glad that it's here at this point. I do want to shift quickly to the bad. Because we do have some bad. I know we've worked some of it into the good, but I want to start with the rebounds, because I think there was times where, again, a team that I thought we should have been just working on the rebounds rebounded us 36-29. And I think a lot of it had to do with the first half. I think in the second half, it was skewed a little bit more in our favor. But when it comes to the rebounds, it's just about positioning. And I think there was just slight things that guys can do with the positioning. I think one person that I'll point out, and not necessarily to rag on him, but Mark Williams, I think there was a stark difference between his positioning in the first half and his positioning in the second half when it comes to defensive rebounds. And because of that, he was able, again, to position himself to get the block or position himself to get a rebound and take the ball and feed it out for a fast break. I think when it comes to him, it's just slight footwork. And I think if he continues to improve on his footwork, we're going to see more Mark Williams rebounds, especially when it counts.
Mark Williams was also in my bad. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that Mark had a bad game, but I thought you're talking about footwork and positioning. Duke repeatedly went into Mark Williams in the post in the first half, and he really struggled to finish. He needs to work more on those post moves. And the thing to me is he needs to understand that if it's not there, relocate the ball. If he doesn't have the right angle, throw the ball back out to the perimeter, which, by the way, often results in a good shot from the perimeter, or it'll allow you to reposition yourself and get a better angle. Mark, at times, in this game didn't have a great angle for a shot, and took the shot anyway. And that's something I feel like he really needs to work on and get better at.
Yeah. And also I think it's just where he was. Like he was positioning himself a little bit further away from the basket and trying to back down a guy where the guy, if he gives an inch, he doesn't have to, right? Whereas if you start it a little bit lower, that guy's feet are now in that restricted area. So at this point, Mark Williams has the leverage. He's like, anything I do, this guy is going to get a blocking call because he's inside that circle. If he just positions himself a little bit further deep where he can back that guy down into that restricted area, he'll be much better and have more options with the basketball, especially going up, because anything that goes up is going to be called a foul on the other team because he's inside that circle.
On a similar topic, I just wanted to come back to something that came up in the good. I know that we said that this game has a lot of good interwoven with bad. Paulo Banchero last night, 24 points on 23 shots is really not the kind of output that you want from your star player. It means that there are a lot of wasted shots going on. And I do still think there's a tendency for him to feel like he needs to be a bit more of the hero than he has to be on this team, especially if other guys are cooking the way that AJ Griffin is. So, there are still a few mid-range shots in Paulo's game, not as many last night, but still some that I think are questionable. And then just his decision-making, even in the post to make the right shot. And if not, to make the right pass. I think like I was saying, I think there are still more passes that Duke could be making to make the offense click just a little bit faster.
Well, yeah, like we said, I mean, the first half, the passing was not there at all. Sam, the only explanation I would have for what you're talking about with Paulo was I think he felt like he had to take on more of a role because Wendell Moore stepped back so significantly. We have, Wendell Moore has been scoring upper teens for this team, very consistently. And yet the past few games, it feels like he's become a fraction of the player he was on offense, at least in terms of, scoring and looking for his own shot. At one point in the first half, he took a wretched contested turnaround jump shot from about 12 feet that had maybe a 25% chance of going in. Took it on the baseline. I was like, why are you taking that shot? That's a terrible shot, unless you're desperate. And Duke was not desperate. Wendell in this game only attempted 5 shots and only scored 7 points. Duke is going to need more output than that. I mean, I want to be clear. He had a great game in other areas, especially in assists. He was steady. In the second half, especially, Duke was putting the ball in his hands and allowing him to create stuff for other people. And that's fabulous. But we need more than 7 points out of Wendell Moore, I think, for, as much as AJ stepped up in scoring and as much as Sam talked about Paulo, was having to take more shots. I think some of that is because Wendell wasn't able to find his shot. And that's something that we need the Wendell Moore back that was 15, 5, and 5, not a Wendell that is only getting, 7, 8, points per game.
I think the distribution of the basketball and just the shot selection from everybody on the floor is going to be the biggest challenge facing Duke over the next couple of weeks. Just as you said, we have this new lineup now. We'll see if it continues. I think we all agree that it probably will, but that is going to come with some, just some tweaks on like, hey, Wendell, how we get Wendell involved in the game. How do we get Mark Williams involved in the game? How do we continue to keep AJ involved in the game? And how do we get Paulo his shots? I think is all going to be a question that we have over the next couple of weeks. But what
and you know what, Donald, the one name you didn't mention there that I think we haven't said him at all, but I want to mention, I thought Jeremy Roach, considering he got sent to the bench for first time all season, and his minutes, he'd been playing 30 plus, he gets less than 20 and it's right around 19 and a half or so. When he came in the game, I thought Jeremy Roach, at times was doing a really, really nice job. He didn't let it get him down. At least it didn't appear to me. The fact that he wasn't starting, we still need Jeremy Roach to be a good contributor. There were a couple times he had really, really nice assists to create very easy baskets for his teammates. I just wanted to praise him for a moment because it'd be real easy to get down when you get sent to the bench the way he did, taken out of the starting lineup the way he was. And yeah, it sure feels like, barring injury, Jeremy Roach is not going to be back in the starting lineup for a while, I would think, at least in terms of how the team is playing and how individuals are performing. I like the fact that Jeremy Roach is still keeping his head up and contributing nicely to this team's progression.
Jason Evans, always ending the bad with the good. I appreciate that. So we'll leave it there. Duke now 3-1 in the ACC, 13-2 overall. Next up, a weekend battle at home against NC State. On the other side of this break, we will preview what to expect from the Wolfpack. All right, y'all. Next up for Duke is another Tobacco Road rival. On Saturday, NC State will come to Cameron to face the Blue Devils, and we want to make sure you're well-versed in what we can see on the basketball court. So first off, NC State's not having a good year right now. They're currently 9-8 on the season, 2-4 in the ACC. They did just beat Louisville on the road last night by 16, so that is a positive change for them. But they, other than Louisville, they only have 2 top 100 wins according to KenPom, and that's at home to Louisiana Tech and on the road at Virginia Tech. So they also had a home win over Nebraska, I believe, in the ACC Big Ten Challenge that went 4 overtimes. So they when it comes to stamina, they can go quite a bit with basketball, because 4 overtimes is no slouch of a game. I don't care who you're playing. But again, lately they have not been playing well. Their win last night was just their second win in 8 games, and they've lost 5 in a row at one point, including one to Wright State before they beat Virginia Tech last Tuesday. So I want to turn it over to Sam. Sam, why don't you tell us about some of the players that we can look out for on this NC State team?
Yeah, as I was looking at NC State this morning, I was remembering that Duke's game at NC State last year was one of the lone bright spots in an otherwise pretty dismal season. Duke beat the pants off of NC State in Raleigh last year. This year, the game is in Cameron. So hopefully Duke is able to extract even more advantage from that. I think you highlighted it perfectly, Donald, that NC State is just not having that great a year under Kevin Keatts. They're 102nd in KenPom and probably unlikely to make the tournament without having, a win this weekend against Duke and maybe a few other big wins. There just isn't that much on the resume for State. That being said, there are some interesting guys. The sort of headliner on this team is a guy who's a sophomore who was on the bench last year for NC State, did not play all that much, and that's Darian Sebron. He's sort of notionally a forward given his size, but basically plays point guard for State. He's kind of a mid-sized point guard. So in that sense, they have a guy who would be somewhat similar to Wendell Moore. Now, that being said, not that great of a shooter. He's a good scorer, averages nearly 20 points and nearly 10 rebounds a game for State. But a lot of that is inside. He is creating and facilitating a lot. In a way that is sort of unique given his size. But he is basically playing power forward while also playing point guard. He's joined in the post by Ebenezer Dewuna, who is a very large human being and is mostly there for offensive rebounds and putbacks and dunks. You'll notice here, I think that there's not as much offensive firepower with NC State. That being said, 2 guys from the outside who can shoot it. Jericole Helms, who Duke fans should be familiar with. He is a senior who has been at NC State for 4 years. I feel like when we were talking about Wake Forest, it was this guy, he transferred in last year, and this other guy, he transferred in 2 years ago. Helms has been at NC State for 4 straight years. I think that is incredible in today's college basketball. And by the way, he shoots 41% from outside. So look for him, and Terquavion Smith is the other outside threat for State. Smith is a freshman guard who's also shooting a good clip from outside. And then the last starter on this team is Cam Hayes. Not as much of an impact player. I think, smaller guy, you would have notionally expected him to be the point guard, but isn't kind of putting up the numbers that Sebron is playing. So that's sort of the starting lineup for State. They don't have a super deep bench. I don't think any of the guys on their bench are like particularly notable. I don't believe there are big NBA prospects on this team. So this is, like many other ACC opponents that Duke is going to face this season, not a team that matches up with Duke talent-wise. There is some experience, but not nearly as much as Wake Forest or Miami had. So, if you're looking at this from a From an experience and talent standpoint, just matching up the lineups, you really expect Duke to have a significant advantage over NC State. But I do want to give Jason a chance to chime in with the team wide analytics, because I think that will give you a bit more color on what to expect.
Yeah. So like you said, NC State is 102nd at KenPom, 102. They have the 41st best offensive efficiency and the 185th. That's right, number 185 in defensive efficiency. Not good. The Ken Pomeroy computers expect the Duke Blue Devils to win this game by 15 points. In terms of NC State, despite having a good offense, like I said, 41st best, they play at a fairly slow pace. I would not expect this to be, a track race running up and down the floor. NC State doesn't want to do that kind of stuff. And they're good on offense because they don't turn the ball over. They are top 15 in the country. I'll say that again, top 15 in the country at turnover percentage. They're top 25 in the country at not giving up steals. It's really hard to take the ball away from them. But as Sam sort of alluded to, they're not really great shooters. They don't have a lot of guys who can fill it up. They're ranked in the 200s in 2-point field goal percentage and in 3-point field goal percentage. They hit less than 33% of their threes overall. So you wouldn't expect them to rain threes down on Duke very much. They're very much a one-on-one kind of offensive team. Their assist percentage, the number of shots they get off of assists, is in the bottom 50 in the country, which is, very poor. This is, like I said, a team that wants to go one-on-one. On defense, they're a very poor defensive team. It looks like they do a terrible job of stopping teams from getting what they want to get. As a result, NC State's opponents hit better than 50% of their 2-point field goals. That's a big number. If you can hit 50% of your 2-point field goals, you're probably doing fairly well. And State isn't even all that good at stopping teams from shooting threes. Teams hit about 35% of their 3-pointers against State. State's okay at blocking shots and getting steals. Not special, but not bad at those two arenas. The interesting thing is that that on rebounding, they're an okay offense. This is sort of weird. You don't see this very often. They're an okay offensive rebounding team. They get almost 32% of their offensive rebounds. That's, 88th best in the country, top 100 offensive rebounding team. But they're a terrible defensive rebounding team. 244th in the country at defensive rebounding. Sometimes you see a team that doesn't try to, like Miami was a team where we saw this, where they didn't offensive rebound at all. They just don't go for offensive rebounds, but they're good at defensive rebounding. It is really rare to see a team that gets offensive rebounds and not defensive rebounds, but that's NC State. It's very strange. And I expect that, Duke's a fairly decent offensive rebounding team. I expect that could be something that we really focus on a lot. And I wanted to mention just very quickly, Sam was giving us the players, and there were not a lot of names there other than Jericho Helms. There are not a lot of guys there where you're like, oh, I recognize that name. I know that guy. This NC State team is really young. I mean, really young. They're basically all freshmen and sophomores other than Helms. Ken Pomeroy says they're the 303rd most experienced team in the country.
And by the way, their best player, Sebron, I said he's a sophomore, but it's not like a sophomore who was like a standout freshman. He barely played last year. And when he did play, it wasn't like he was that effective. The leap he's made is pretty incredible, but it really is coming from, very little experience from last year.
Yeah. And we've been used to, it feels like Duke is constantly playing teams this year that are very, very experienced, that have guys who are 4th and 5th year seniors and all that other kind of stuff. Yeah, there's just very little of that on this NC State team. It's a team that, like Duke, they're not as young as Duke, but they're close. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, Sam mentioned their center, Ebenezer Duwona. His usage rate. Now, usage rate is how often you get the ball on offense and take a shot or get an assist or have a turnover. Usage rate. His usage rate is 7.6%. I want to repeat that. There are only 5 guys on the floor at one time. The average usage rate is 20% because you either, take a shot or turn the ball over. The possession ends with you it should be, for most guys, it's 1 of every 5 times. Duwona's usage rate is 7.6%. I don't think I've ever seen a guy who had a usage rate that low.
I told you, he's just there for offensive rebounds and putbacks.
Yeah.
We call that's all cardio. That man is just getting his conditioning on the court throughout the game. That's all he's doing.
And it's worth noting, other than him, other than Duona, they don't have big players. He's the only big guy they've got. And they've got a lot of guys who are like in the 6'7", 180, 190 kind of range. Like they don't even have guys who are like 6'7", 6'8", and kind of beefy. Paulo Banchero is going to be guarded by someone who's going to be 6'7", maybe 200 pounds. Paulo's going to have 3 inches and 30 pounds,
40 pounds
on everyone guarding him.
AJ Griffin and Wendell Moore are both going to look big in this game.
Yep. Yeah. NC State is young and they're thin. Not a good combination against Duke.
Well, hopefully that means a lot of second chance putbacks for us, a lot of rebounds, because as you said, they're not great at grabbing defensive rebounds. So hopefully that opens the door for a lot of second chance points. Is something that we haven't got a lot in games recently due to rebounding, but we will leave it here. And again, that game Saturday, ABC at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So we're on network TV.
Hey, by the way, game is on Saturday. Do you know what else is Saturday? It's my birthday. I turned 55 on Saturday. Duke better give me a good birthday present and blow the NC State Wolfpack out of blow the doors off them.
Let's get that for Jason. That's perfect.
I like it. Marry this into the universe. Make the metaverse, the Spider-Verse, all the verses. Let's make it where Jason has a great 55th birthday. So happy early birthday, Jason Evans.
Thank you.
Turning the big 5-5 on Saturday. So
what happens at 55? I feel, is there some milestone that happens at 55?
Your body doesn't feel as good as it did at 45.
Yeah, but that happens at 54. Like that happens at 32. So
dude, wait, no, hold on. I got to tell you, I remember at least a little bit how I felt in my 30s and 40s. 50s are tough, man. 55. Starting on Saturday, I will be closer to 60 than 50. That sucks.
I mean, you're wise with experience.
Oh man.
Yeah. It's useful. It's useful. But here's the thing. Let's get through Saturday. Let's have a nice birthday for Jason. Let's get a nice Duke basketball win as a nice birthday gift. Make sure you tune in for that. But that will do it for episode 378 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. A reminder to all of you out there that we have an email address and has been used heavily over the last few weeks, and we appreciate it. So you can send us questions, comments, topic suggestions. Hit us up, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. Also, you can like, subscribe, rate, and review the show. We appreciate it greatly. We will be back over the weekend after Jason is done celebrating his birthday, and we will recap the NC State game and tackle any other news that may come our way. So for Sam Klein and Jason Evans, I'm Donald Wine, and now we leave the Duke band to take us all home.
Get well soon, Coach K.